Ciao, and welcome to Immersion Travel Italy. I'm Katerina Ferrara, travel author, travel blogger, and your host. Today's episode is the third in our regional capital series, following Turin, Piedmont's capital, and Bologna, the capital of Emilia-Romagna. This time, I'm staying in the north of Italy, but in a region that wasn't always Italian. Until 1918, this area was Austria. After World War I, the border shifted and Trento became part of Italy. That history is still alive here. You hear both German and Italian spoken on the streets. You see it in the architecture, you taste it in the food, and you feel it in the way the city presents itself. In this series, we're not simply visiting the regional capitals, we're exploring them, because each one reveals something essential about Italy itself. These are cities where power was negotiated, ideas were shaped, borders were tested, and daily life evolved in response to geography, history, and culture. And today, that brings us to Trento, the capital of Trentino Alto Adige. Trento is often overlooked. It doesn't have the instant recognition of Florence, the scale of Milan, or the cinematic drama of Venice. But that's exactly why it belongs in this series. This capital is shaped by its setting in the Alps, in the Adige Valley, by religion and reform, by politics and borders, and by centuries of living between worlds. And unlike most Italian cities, Trento is still living between those worlds today. We arrived in Trento by car, traveling north through the Adige Valley of the Dolomite Mountains. And that approach was very beautiful. Here, the landscape begins to narrow. Mountains rise closer on either side of the road. The air feels cleaner, cooler, and sharper. You sense almost immediately that it's not any other Italian city. This is a place shaped by its geography in a very real way. This is the same valley corridor that has been used for 2 millennia. Roman legions marched this route north toward the empire's frontiers. Centuries later, soldiers from 2 world wars passed through these same mountain narrows. Geography made Trento strategic, and it made it distinct. We arrived and parked and noticed the locals on the move, on foot or by bicycle. It was late May, warm, but no humidity. The streets were clean. The buildings are a mix of elegance and history. The Germanic precision blended seamlessly with Italian warmth. As I walked toward the historic center with my family, what struck us first was how contained everything felt, not crowded or overwhelming. We always start any visit at the Duomo or the cathedral, which in Italy is always the town's center. The Duomo rises confidently in its piazza. And the Museo del Duomo, we were genuinely impressed by the depth of what's preserved there. Nearby, you have the formal papal palace that commands respect and grandeur. Compared to Turin's elegance and Bologna's intellectual energy, Trento felt quieter, more centered, a place where power had once been exercised carefully, deliberately, and with an awareness of its position between north and south. Very quickly, it became clear. This is a border city that learned how to live between 2 worlds and learn how to do it well. To understand Trento, we have to start where all the power here begins, with geography. Long before Trento was a regional capital, long before it hosted councils and bishops, it was called the Roman city of Tridentium, which means 3 teeth, tridentum, named for the 3 mountain peaks that rise around it. The Romans established it not for beauty, but for control. Trento sits in the Adige Valley, one of the most important natural corridors through the Alps. This valley was a passageway, a funnel through which armies marched, merchants traded, and ideas moved between the Italian peninsula and northern Europe. Whoever controlled this stretch of land controlled access across the mountains. For Rome, that made Tridentum indispensable. A city developed as a military and administrative center, guarding the Alpine routes while facilitating trade. Roads converged here, supply lines passed through, authority flowed north and south along the same paths people still travel today. What's striking is how its role hasn't changed. Roman foundations aren't abstract here, you can still see them. Beneath the modern city lies Tridentum, and parts of it are visible today. Near Piazza Cesare Battisti, underground passages preserve sections of Roman walls, roads, and buildings. Walking through them, you understand how little Trento's role has changed. The streets above follow the same logic as the Roman ones below: movement, access, and control. Trento did not reinvent itself, it simply kept functioning. As you walk through Trento's historic center now, the Roman street grid still remains visible. Streets are orderly, direct, and practical. This is not a city that reinvented itself in the Middle Ages. It adapted. Most Italian cities layer history vertically. Trento stretches horizontally, continuing to function as a connector rather than a destination built for display. It explains why Trento worked as an administrative center for 8 centuries under an unusual form of government, and why it's trusted to host one of Europe's most consequential religious events. After Rome fell, Trento passed through the hands of the Ostrogoths, the Byzantines, the Lombards, and the Franks. Each left traces. None stayed permanently. The valley remained strategic, but no single power could hold it long enough to build lasting institutions. That instability ended in 1027, when Emperor Conrad II of the Holy Roman Empire made a decision that would define Trento for the next 8 centuries. He created the Prince-Bishopric of Trento. This was not a papal appointment, it was an imperial one. The Bishop of Trento would now wield both religious authority and secular power. He could govern, tax, mint coins, maintain armies, and administer justice. Prince of the Holy Roman Empire, who happened to be a bishop, or a bishop who happened to be a prince. The distinction mattered. Most Italian territories during this period were either controlled by the Pope or feudal lords. Trento was neither. It existed in a carefully maintained middle position, loyal to the emperor in the north, connected to the Church of Rome, but independent of both in practice. The arrangement was strategic, not accidental. The emperor needed reliable allies who controlled the Alpine passes, but would it become too powerful? They owned their position thanks to imperial favor, not hereditary claim. And Trento's location made it indispensable. But independence required constant defense. The Counts of Tyrol, powerful nobles who controlled territories toward the north, around Bolzano, pressed for control. They wanted Trento. They wanted to control the mountain passes. And for centuries, the prince-bishops had to maneuver carefully between imperial support and local resistance. In 1172, Bishop Aldepreto was murdered at Arco by the lords of Castelbarco during one such power struggle. The message was clear. Ruling Trento required more than religious authority. It required political skill, military strength, and imperial backing. By the early 13th century, Bishop Federico Wanga, a relative of Emperor Otto IV, reorganized the principality, issued the first Alpine mining code, and expanded Trento's control over surrounding territories. He died during a crusade to the Holy Land, but his reforms held. The system worked because it had to, and for a remarkably long time. But the prince-bishops of Trento weren't just defending territory, they were controlling revenue. Emperor Frederick Barbarossa and his son Henry VI granted the bishops a critical right, the power to impose tolls. Every merchant traveling between Venice and Germany passed through the Adige Valley. Every wagon carrying German goods south to Italian markets. Every mule train hauling wine, textiles, or spices north across the Alps. They all moved through Trento's territory, and the prince-bishops collected fees for their passage. This wasn't symbolic, it's the foundation of the principality's wealth. The Brenner Pass, just north of Trento, was the easiest Alpine crossing between Germanic world and Italy. Unlike higher, more treacherous passes, the Brenner remained passable year-round. From the 14th century onward, one of Europe's great trade arteries. Merchants from Venice, Florence, and Genoa traveled north with silk, glass, and Mediterranean luxuries. German traders traded south with metal goods, furniture, and cloths from Flanders. All of them needed safe passage, maintained roads, and protection from bandits. The prince-bishops provided these services for a price. Tolls funded road maintenance, bridge construction, and military forces necessary to keep the routes secure. They also funded the expansion of the Castello di Buon Consiglio, the construction of churches, and the administration of justice. Geography had made Trento strategically important. Tolls made it financially independent. This is why the Counts of Tyrol wanted it so badly. This is why the bishops fought so hard to maintain their autonomy. Whoever controlled the valley controlled the revenue stream flowing north and south in Europe. Federico Wanda understood this completely. His 1208 mining code wasn't just about regulating silver extraction from Monte Calcisio. It was about diversifying income and establishing legal frameworks that made Trento attractive to merchants and miners alike. He supported trade along the Adige route, granted concessions to the merchant class, and expanded the city's walls to protect the growing economic activity. Trento became wealthy not because it produced luxury goods, but because it sat in the intersection of those who did. The principality's economic model was simple: maintain the routes, guarantee safety, charge for access, and use the revenue to strengthen both infrastructure and independence. It worked for centuries. By the 16th century, when the Council of Trent was convened, the city was governed by two of its most capable prince-bishops, Bernardo Clesio from 1514 to 1539, and Cristoforo Madrizzo from 1539 to 1567. Bernardo Clesio was the one who lobbied to bring the council to Trento. He understood what hosting such an event would mean for the city's status. Madrizzo presided during the council's most important sessions, managing the delicate politics of hosting Catholic Europe's most important theological debate. Both were Renaissance humanists, skilled European politicians, and effective administrators. They expanded the Castel di Buon Consiglio, the seat of the prince-bishops, into the impressive complex that visitors see today. They commissioned art, supported printing presses, and maintained Trento's reputation as a city of serious governance. And it lasted until Napoleon arrived with his armies in 1796. Napoleon, jeez. The prince-bishopric was formally dissolved in 1803 and absorbed into the Austrian Empire. After nearly 8 centuries, Trento's unique position, neither fully German nor fully Italian, neither papal nor secular, came to an end. But the legacy remained. The structures the prince-bishops built still stand. The political instincts they cultivated, neutrality, balance, and careful diplomacy, still shape how Trento presents itself. And understanding that geography determines destiny is still visible in every decision the city makes, even across the 800 years. Let's talk Council of Trent. In the 16th century, Trento became the setting for one of the most consequential events in European religious history, the Council of Trent. Meeting intermittently between 1545 and 1563, the council was the Catholic Church's formal response to the Protestant Reformation. By this point, Christianity in Europe was fractured. Martin Luther's ideas started to spread, and the Church could not ignore it. The Council of Trent was convened to clarify the Catholic beliefs, reform internal corruption, and define doctrine with precision. The decisions made here reshaped theology, liturgy, education, and governance across the Catholic world. Even today, much of the modern Catholic identity traces back to what was debated and decided those years in Trento. So why here? Because Trento was uniquely suited to the task. It was politically neutral ground, positioned between the Protestant territories to the north and Catholic Italy to the south. It was safe and tightly controlled, yet accessible to the bishops, theologians, and envoys traveling across Europe. It offered stability without dominance and protection without spectacle. Once again, geography determined destiny. On December 13th in 1545, the council opened with a modest ceremony in the Cathedral of St. Vigilus. Just 31 bishops were present, a small beginning for what would become an 18-year debate. But over those years, the delegations grew. Bishops traveled the same mountain passes the Romans had once used. Spanish prelates made the long journey. Italian bishops arrived from across the peninsula. French delegates finally appeared in November of 1562, nearly at the council's close, 26 of them, along with abbots and theologians having navigated both Alpine routes and their own king's political resistance. By the final decision in December of 1563, 255 members signed the decrees. These are cardinals, patriarchs, archbishops, and bishops. The majority were Italian. Geographically, that was inevitable, but Spain sent 31, France 26. Bishops came from all across Catholic Europe. Alongside them sat theologians, canon lawyers, and advisors who spent years working through each doctrinal point with meticulous care. The council left a visible imprint on the city. Palaces were expanded to host the delegations. Religious buildings took on new significance. Trento's identity shifted permanently. Today, you can still see this history preserved at the Castello di Buon Consiglio. Inside, paintings document the council sessions. Bishops gathered in debate. The cathedral filled with delegations from across Europe. They aren't dramatized scenes, they're actually records of what was happening. Visual documentation of the 18 years that reshaped the Catholic faith. Painted in a city that understood its role was to provide the setting. In Trento, you feel it in the buildings, the museums, and the way history is preserved. Next, let's start our tour. Trento is a city best understood on foot. Its historic center is compact and ordered. We explored the city with a local guide, who's actually a professor at the University of Trento. And that made all the difference. Rather than just giving us dates, he told us stories about power, faith, and how Trento learned to survive by understanding its position in the world. At the heart of Piazza Duomo stands the Duomo di San Vigilio, dedicated to Trento's patron saint and quietly anchoring the city's spiritual and historical identity. Architecturally, the cathedral mirrors Trento itself. Its Romanesque foundations give it solidarity and restraint, a sense of permanence rather than spectacle. The facade is calm, but deliberately so. Later Gothic and Renaissance elements were added over time, responding to the changing needs rather than fashion. Inside, the space opens with clarity. Columns rise with confidence. Light filters in softly, guiding the eye without distraction. Our guide explained that this was intentional. During the years of the Council of Trent, this was a working cathedral. Bishops, theologians, and envoys moved through the aisles. Prayers were said before debates that would refine the Catholic doctrine. Sermons echoed in the space where faith was being examined, defended, and reshaped. San Vigilio himself represents that community. As an early Christian martyr and Trento's first bishop, his presence connects the city's origins to its defining historical moment. His legacy ties together Trento's Roman past, its early Christian roots, and its role in reshaping the modern Catholic identity. Just steps away, the story continues at the Diocesan Museum, located in the former papal palace overlooking the square. It's great to go inside this building. We really enjoyed it. You've got beautiful views from the top level. It's got it's got a lot. And so I highly recommend a visit to this Diocesan Museum. There were paintings and sculptures, vestments, and architectural fragments from the papal palace. From the museum's windows, you could look back over Piazza Duomo. We also found it interesting how many relics the museum contained in Trento. While we're visiting the Duomo, I want to mention the most important celebration in Trento, Le Feste Vigiliane. Every June, Trento celebrates San Vigilio, its patron saint. This festival runs for several days. There are processions, historical reenactments, public ceremonies. Neighbors complete the Palio d'Oca, a rowing race on the Adige River using traditional boats. Teams take it seriously. The race makes sense when you remember that the river has always been central here. Trade moved on the water, the valley shaped around it, and even now, Adige defines how Trento is laid out. San Vigilio was Trento's early Christian bishop, and the festival honors that history. It's not purely religious. The whole city participates. Families, local teams, neighborhood groups. Kids watch the races, and the rhythm of the city changes for a few days, and then returns to normal. Just steps from Piazza Duomo, we'll turn onto Via Bellinzani. The entire street is lined with Renaissance palazzi covered in frescoes. We were extremely impressed by the beauty of this street. Not just a few buildings, nearly every facade between the Duomo and the Castello del Buon Consiglio. These aren't murals in a modern sense. They're painted directly onto wet plaster, a technique that makes them part of the wall itself. Most date from the 15th and 16th centuries, commissioned by wealthy merchants and nobles during the time of the Council of Trent. The imagery varies. On Case Cazzuffi-Rella, right at the corner of the piazza, mythological figures dominate. Diana and other Roman deities. The artist, Marcello Foligno, painted them around 1530 and used contrasting techniques. Monochrome, chiaroscuro on the building, vivid color on another. Palazzo Geremia features classical scenes and a trompe-l'oeil architectural details. Painted columns, false windows, decorative moldings that aren't actually there. Palazzo Quieta Alberti Collico shows similar motifs in the original Venetian pastels, now faded but still visible. What's striking is how casual it all feels. No one's guarding the frescoes, no one tells you not to touch the walls, they're just here, weathered and part of the streetscape. The frescoes aren't religious statements, they're cultural ones, symbols of education, wealth, and the merchant class's rising influence. Trento's prince bishops permitted this kind of display because it reinforced the city's image as sophisticated, connected, and cultured, exactly the qualities that made it credible as the site of the council. Rising just above Trento's historic center is the Castello di Buon Consiglio, the former seat of the prince bishops, the castle of good counsel. For nearly 8 centuries, Trento was ruled not by kings or dukes, but by these prince bishops, religious leaders who held both spiritual and temporal power. In a border city like Trento, this wasn't unusual. The castle reflects the dual role immediately. It's clearly defensive with thick walls and commanding position, yet it's also refined. This was not a fortress meant only for war. This was a residence, an administrative center, and a civil of cultivated authority. As we moved through the complex, our guide explained how the castle evolved over time. Medieval towers gave way to Renaissance additions. Living quarters were expanded. Loggias were added. Each generation of bishops left its mark, shaping the castle not as a single statement of power, but as a layered expression of governance. Inside, the frescoes tell that story beautifully. Rather than glorifying conquest, they emphasize order, harmony, and legitimacy. Scenes of courtly life, allegorical imagery, and carefully constructed symbolism reveal rulers who understood that power in Trento required diplomacy. These were leaders that negotiated constantly with emperors, popes, local elites, and neighboring territories. Trento could never afford a misstep, and the castle reflects the awareness. One of my favorite spots in the castle, we actually paused for a cafe at the small cafe tucked within the castle walls. Sitting here with the stone walls rising around us, history presenting quietly from every direction, the pace slowed. From the loggia was also beautiful views across the open city in the Adige Valley. Rooftops stretch below, mountains rise in the distance. Road trace the same paths they have for centuries. I loved being on the loggia as well. When you get there, the view will explain everything. After walking, listening, and absorbing, we did what Italians do next. We ate. Our guide recommended lunch at Antica Trattoria Due Mori, one of the most respected traditional restaurants in the center. It was exactly the kind of place that fits Trento. Historic, unpretentious, and deeply rooted in local cuisine. This is where the city's identity truly comes together. Trentino food sits at the crossroads of Northern Europe and Italy. Mountain ingredients meet Italian technique. Dishes are hearty but thoughtful. I want to mention the candelari. These are traditional bread dumplings from Trentino Alto Adige. They're also called Knödel in German, another example of the region's dual identity. They're large dumplings about the size of a tennis ball, made primarily from stale bread. They're mixed with eggs, milk, and speck, which is smoked ham. They're cooked in boiling broth or salted water for about 15 minutes, and they're served in either the broth or dry with melted butter and stage. You'll also find polenta and speck as traditions, and cheeses. The region produces two particularly notable cheeses, both with the protected designation of origin status, or DOP. The first is Trentina Grana, Trentino's version of Grana cheese, similar to Parmigiano Reggiano. It's been made here since 1925, using only mountain and pasture milk from native Alpine cows. What sets it apart is the only milk hay tradition. The cows are fed exclusively on hay and non-GMO forage, which means the cheese contains nothing but milk, rennet, and salt. No additives, no preservatives. It's aged 18 to 24 months, developing a herby flavor with notes of caramel. The second is Puzzone di Moena, DOP. And yes, Puzzone literally means stinky. It's a washed rind cheese made from cow's milk in Fiemme, Fassa, and Primario valleys. During the aging process, which lasts anywhere from 90 days to 10 months, cheesemakers wash the wheel daily with warm, salted water. That creates the cheese's famously intense aroma and its robust, slightly sharp flavor. The name is direct. The smell is unforgettable. And the locals call it Sprezz Tesori in Latin, which translates to tasty cheese, a much kinder name for the same product. Both cheeses are served throughout Trento, sometimes grated over the canderli, melted into polenta, or simply enjoyed with bread and a glass of local wine. Other Trentino cheeses you might encounter: Vezena di Trentino, which is mountain cheese; Tosella di Primario, which is a type of fresh cheese; or Graxe, which is gray cheese, sometimes mentioned in traditional recipes. Cafes in Trento reflect the same rhythm. Service is efficient, calm, and precise. There's no rush. As far as the pasticceria, I'm going to recommend the Pasticceria San Vigilio Trento. It has delightful local pastries and is consistently good. One other local product worth lingering on is the Trent Dock sparkling wine, the region's traditional sparkling wine. Made using the same metodo classico as champagne, Trento Dock reflects Trentino's mountain climate. High-altitude vineyards, cool temperatures, and long aging create wines that are crisp, precise, and restrained. Just a short walk from Piazza Duomo stands Santa Maria Maggiore, one of the most historically significant churches in the city and one of the most important sites connected to the Council of Trent. Between 1545 and 1563, the church hosted many of the council's formal sessions. While the Duomo anchored Trento spiritually, Santa Maria Maggiore functioned as a working space of debate and decision-making. This is where theologians gathered, arguments unfolded, and doctrine was clarified. Standing in the nave, our guide explained how the council unfolded over years rather than days. Delegates arrived slowly from across Europe. Sessions were paused, resumed, shifted locations, and throughout it all, Santa Maria Maggiore remained constant, quietly absorbing the weight of decisions that would shape Catholic life for centuries. From Santa Maria Maggiore, we want to walk up Via Suffragio. This street reveals an older rhythm. You'll see medieval porticos line the street, creating shade and enclosure. This was a working street, shaped by the daily movement rather than display. Here, you feel how Trento functioned before it became a stage for councils. Via del Suffragio was named after the Chiesa di Santa Maria di Suffragio, St. Mary of Suffrage, a Baroque church from the 18th century that still stands on the street. Before it was officially called Via del Suffragio, the street was known as Contrada Todesca, the German Quarter. Between the 14th and 18th centuries, this is where German merchants and artisans settled as they arrived in Trento. The street connects directly to the Porta San Martino, the northern gate of the city, through which the German traders entered. The west side of the street had medieval porticos that housed German taverns, inns, and workshops. Exactly the kind of practical commercial architecture you'd expect along a major trade route. This was the working street for the people, passing through, doing business, and staying overnight. The name officially changed to Via del Suffragio after the church was built in the 1700s, but locals kept calling it Contrada Todesca well into the 19th century. The name struck us because that's exactly what it was, a place where German-speaking world met the Italian one. Medieval towers still punctuate the city landscape. The Torre Vania and the Torre Verde rise as reminders of a time when visibility and defense mattered deeply. Towers were symbols of authority, watchtowers, and survival in a city that could never take stability. Next, let's talk views and nature. The Funivia Trento Sardinia is a funicular that offers one of the clearest perspectives of the city. In just minutes, the cable car lifts you above the rooftops, revealing the city nestled high in the Adige Valley, framed by mountains on all sides. From this vantage point, Trento's history suddenly makes sense. You see the corridors armies once followed, the routes merchants traveled, the natural boundaries that shaped political caution and cultural blend. Closer to the city, DOS Trento provides a quieter alternative. Walking paths wind up the hill, offering sweeping views without leaving town. It's a kind of place locals use, not just visitors. A reminder that Trento's relationship with nature is daily, not decorative. I also want to mention the University of Trento. Our guide was a professor at the university, and he spoke about the city and how it shaped history. The University of Trento is relatively young by Italian standards, founded in 1962. Today, it has approximately 16,000 students, and that size feels substantial without overwhelming the city. It's a dispersed university with facilities spread throughout the historic center and surrounding neighborhoods, as well as modern campuses on the hills above the city. This layout reinforces Trento's long tradition of integrating learning into daily life. I also want to mention Trento during World War II. As we walked through the city, our guide, who, as I mentioned, is a professor, shared something personal. He spoke about his father and the role he played during World War II as part of the local resistance movement here in Trento. During World War II, this region was not on the margins of conflict. After Italy's armistice in 1943, Trento became part of Operazione Alpenvorland, a German-controlled territory administered directly by Nazi authorities. The borderland identity that defined Trento for centuries suddenly became dangerous. The mountains that once carried merchants and scholars now sheltered resistance fighters. Local partisans, many of them ordinary citizens or students, workers, and families, organized quietly. They used their knowledge of the terrain, the valleys, and the mountain pass to move messages, protect civilians, and resist occupation. These were not large-scale battles. They were acts of courage carried out in secrecy at great personal risk. Listening to our guide speak about his father, it became clear how deeply this history still lives here. Resistance in Trento was not about spectacle, it was about survival, about protecting identity. When history is carried through families, not monuments, it doesn't fade. Festivals. I mentioned the patron saint festival, but there are two other festivals I need to note for you. One of them is the Trento Film Festival. Each spring, Trento hosts one of Europe's most respected cultural events, the Trento Film Festival. Founded in 1952, it's the oldest mountain film festival in the world, and it focuses on everything about the city. It celebrates films dedicated to mountains, exploration, adventure, and humanity's relationship with nature. It's not a red carpet festival. Screenings, talks, exhibitions, and debates take place across the city, drawing filmmakers, climbers, scientists, and thinkers from around the world. Topics range from environmental protection to cultural survival in remote landscapes. In Trento, surrounded by the Alps, this festival seems obvious. The other festival I want to mention is the Christmas market. This has Alpine tradition right in the historic center, and it's very famous across Italy. Starting on December 8th and running through January 6th, Trento transforms for the Mercatino di Natale di Trento, one of North Italy's most atmospheric Christmas markets. Centered around Piazza Duomo, wooden stalls fill the square beneath the cathedral, offering local crafts, Alpine decorations, regional food products, and warm drinks. The influence here is distinctly Alpine. For visitors, it offers one clear glimpse into Trentino's layered identity. Italy at the heart, Alpine in rhythm, and deeply connected to this place. Next, let's talk about some day trips from Trento. Starting with Bolzano. It's about 40 minutes by train. Just north of Trento is Bolzano, the capital of South Tyrol and one of Italy's most culturally complex cities. We stayed 5 nights here in May in a B&B with a striking view of the mountains over the city. Those views reminded us constantly where we were, not just in a city, but in a valley pressed tight in the Alps. Every morning we saw how geography shapes daily life. Bolzano feels immediately different. The Alps press closer, German and Italian coexist in daily life. Architecture shifts towards Central European forms with arcaded streets and steep roofs that speak to a colder climate and a different historical allegiance. The daily market in Piazza delle Erbe became part of our routine. Vendors called out in both languages. Fresh produce from the valley sat alongside speck and mountain cheese. It's not staged for tourists, it's local shopping. The market showed the city's bilingual reality in action. What struck me most, though, was listening to locals speak to each other, almost always in German. Italian appeared on signs and in official documents, but in conversation between neighbors, friends, shopkeepers at the bar, it was German. By the time we left, I found myself missing the Italian language. The city's vibe felt confident, self-contained. Bolzano's got a beautiful range of colorful houses. The historic center is compact and elegant. Arcades run through the streets where sheltered merchants move goods through the valley. The Bolzano Cathedral, with its Gothic spire, reflects northern influences rather than Italian classicism. One of the most compelling sights is the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology, home to Ötzi, an Iceman. His presence is more than a curiosity. Bolzano as a day trip is fantastic from Trento. It shows what happens when you move further north, where the Alpine identity becomes dominant and the Italian influence is a bit less. Another spot I want to mention is Bressanone, called Brixen in German. It's about an hour and 20 minutes by train, north of Bolzano, continuing along the same rail line that carried trade and power through the Alps for centuries. In Trento, Italian and German coexist. In Bolzano, they share space with visible tension, and Bressanone German is the primary language. Italian adapts. Historically, Bressanone claims to be the oldest town in Tyrol, with history stretching back over 1,000 years. Like Trento, it was governed by a prince-bishop who wielded both religious and secular authority. The cathedral dominates the town at its center, and it should, dating back to 980 AD, making it one of the most important and sacred buildings in the Alpine region. After fires destroyed earlier versions, it was rebuilt in the Romanesque style in the 12th century, then transformed into Baroque splendor in the 18th. Inside, the ceiling frescoes by Paul Troger depict the adoration of the Lamb across 200 square meters. These are his only works in Tyrol. They're breathtaking. Adjacent to the cathedral is the cloister, one of South Tyrol's most important art monuments. The 14th century Gothic frescoes are remarkably well preserved, depicting scenes from religious and medieval life. Among them, an elephant in the third arcade and the adoration of the kings in the 13th. These are records of a world that passed through here, pilgrims, traders, and artists, all moving along the same corridor. The historic center is compact and elegant and entirely walkable. Arcaded streets recall medieval commerce. The piazza in front of the cathedral hosts market and festivals, much like Trento's Piazza Duomo. but the rhythm is slower. Beyond the cathedral and historic center, Plo's mountain rises just out of town, offering a different kind of Alpine experience. In the summer, we took motorless mountain carts down the slopes, simple wooden carts with just a brake and gravity doing the work. It's a kind of activity that gives you a sense of the place, practical and connected to the landscape. In the winter, Plo's transforms into a ski area with runs overlooking the Dolomites. The mountain isn't marked as a luxury resort. It functions for what it is, accessible alpine terrain that locals and visitors use year-round. Our next day trip will be to Rovereto. It's about 20 minutes by train. Just south of Trento lies Rovereto, a city that quietly carries an intellectual and emotional weight of the 20th century. Rovereto's historic center is modest, but its cultural impact is significant. The city is best known for the MART, Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, one of Italy's most important modern museums. Its architecture is striking, reflecting the same balance found throughout Trentino. During World War I, this region laid near the front lines between Italy and Austria-Hungary. The scars of that conflict are remembered at the Bell of the Fallen, cast from cannons donated by former enemy nations that rung nightly as a call to peace. As a day trip, Rovereto pairs beautifully. It reinforces the region's commitment to culture, education, rather than spectacle. The last day trip I want to mention is Verona. It's about an hour by train, and it is one of Italy's most historically layered cities. Verona feels larger, louder, and more theatrical than Trento. Roman, medieval, and Renaissance layers unfold across a city that has always embraced its importance. The Roman arena remains one of the best preserved amphitheaters in the world, and it still functions for performances today. Medieval towers rise through the historic center, reminders of a time when city-states asserted their power through visibility and scale. Where Trento governed quietly, Verona ruled visibly. Activities beyond the city. Trento doesn't separate itself from the Alps. The mountains begin at the city's edge. Monte Bondone rises directly above the town, close enough that hiking trails start where the historic center ends. No car is required, no planning is required. You walk from Piazza Duomo into forests and alpine meadows within an hour. The trails are well marked, ranging from gentle woodland walks to longer ridge hikes with views over the Adige Valley. What matters here is proximity. It's a part of daily life. The same logic applies to cycling. The Adige Valley cycle path runs through Trento, flat and separated from traffic, connecting north to Bolzano and south to Verona. This isn't decoration, it's infrastructure. Locals commute on it, visitors use it to understand geography. Riding the path, you follow the same corridor that carried Roman legions and medieval merchants, now reimagined as one of Europe's most pleasant cycling routes. For something more distinctly alpine, Trentino is the birthplace of Via Ferrata, a protected climbing routes equipped with steel cables, ladders, and fixed anchors. These paths allow non-technical climbers to experience the dramatic vertical terrain safely. Routes range from beginner-friendly to highly challenging, made easy within reach of Trento. The Adige River flows calmly through the city, but opens into more active stretches just outside Trento. Kayaking and rafting opportunities appear further up and down the valley, especially in the spring when the snowmelt increases water flow. From the river, the valley feels narrower, the mountains taller, and Trento's historic role as a passageway becomes clear. The geography around Trento also makes it a natural hub for paragliding. Launch points on Monte Bondone attract pilots from all across Europe. Watching paragliders drift silently over the valley reinforces something you've felt repeated here. This place is shaped by elevation and perspective. Trento doesn't hibernate in the winter. Monte Bondone transforms into a small but accessible ski area. Downhill skiing, snowshoeing, cross-country trails are all minutes from the city. Unlike major resort towns, the focus remains local and practical. This is where residents ski after work, where families spend weekends, and where winter stays are integrated into daily life. The outdoor activities here aren't marketed as an escape, they're embedded into the city's rhythm. Trento never needed to dominate. It shaped history through position, not force, through precision, not spectacle. The prince-bishops understood what mattered: control the valley, charge the tolls, maintain order, and let geography do the rest. And that logic still holds. Trento functions. It hosts debates, not drama. It's a balance between German and Italian. As we return from our day trips, thank you for visiting Trento with me. For more immersive travel stories, practical planning resources, and companion articles to this episode, visit my website, KaterinaFerrara.com. If you have ideas for a future podcast episode or questions about traveling in Italy, you're always welcome to reach out to me directly, Katerina@KaterinaFerrara.com. This is Immersion Travel Italy, where history, culture, and place come together. Thanks for visiting.